2, 3, 4.
Welcome to Don't Do That, the podcast where we talk about what not to do at work and beyond.
As equity practitioners, we found ourselves often thinking that folks should stop doing things before they start doing things. Hence the title of our podcast, Don't Do That. I'm Anee. I'm an equity coach, organizational equity strategist, and educator with a deep curiosity for how to improve systems and a commitment to lift others as I continue to learn and grow.
I'm Karen, and I've worked in social justice for over a decade. I'm a consultant, coach, and thought partner. My purpose is to make community matter. I do that by helping leaders create better work environments. Anee and I met as consultants and quickly became friends. Collectively, we have over 25 years of experience navigating equity, inclusion, and justice in the workplace. Don't Do That is a platform to tell stories about making mistakes at work and how to fix them. The views on this podcast are our own. We do not speak on behalf of our organizations or the communities we mention. All right, welcome listeners and Happy New Year. Today on Don't Do That, we are back at it with another conversation. And today we are talking about success and the story we're often told about how it's earned, that success requires struggle, that you have to quote unquote pay your dues to deserve it. But is that actually true? Have we collectively accepted the idea that success can't exist without hardship? We'll get into it. Hello, Anee. Welcome back.
Hello,
New Year.
hello. This is a good one too to start off with.
Right. Getting the people right for the beginning of the new year, which is exciting. I thought that this was a really good topic and one that a lot of us can relate to.
Yeah.
And to give some context, like we like to start off, I was scrolling on LinkedIn and came across this post from Jasmine McCall, who is a keynote speaker and helps women turn their corporate trauma into power. And in the post, Jasmine was recalling a professional experience and about a colleague that essentially wanted her to play small. And one of the things that stuck out from the post that Jasmine put up was, she said, "Stop romanticizing the struggle. Success doesn't require suffering." And that really got me to thinking about this idea that in order for us to be successful, we have to sometimes suffer through things. And I know that throughout my career, I've grown up with the adage of like paying your dues and that being a requirement to success. And so, in doing my research for today's topic, I came across this Forbes article titled "Organizational Culture: Paying Your Dues, the Dues That Millennials and Gen Z Are Asked to Pay." And they defined paying dues as to earn certain rights, privileges, etc., as by having suffered and struggle, or to do something that you do not enjoy in order to have something that you want because you feel it is your duty. And I thought this was so relevant. I know that to my experience, and I'm interested to hear more about yours. But in the article, they also talk about how the dues that folks are asked to pay include essentially enduring a toxic work environment, a lack of pay, tools, and training, and overall a lack of inclusion and transparency. And the result of this suffering and this idea of paying dues is poor well-being and burnout. And there is research from a Harris poll done on behalf of the Grossman Group that more than 75% of employees and 63% of managers feel burnt out or ambivalent in their current position. And the findings reveal that the biggest driver of burnout is constant change, along with high turnover and excessive work. And so I felt like this was super relevant to this idea of paying your dues and the toll that it can take on us as professionals. So I wanted to have a good chat with you about this topic, and to jump into things, I really wanted to know what are the dues that you feel like you've had to pay in your career?
You know, I want to say something before I talk about the dues that I've had to pay. So as
Okay.
I was thinking about this topic, candidly, it was so tough for me to take like a meta view of like what would a healthy work environment look like? Because this idea of like paying your dues is, in my opinion, so entrenched in how we understand work. I mean,
Mhm.
if we think of early career professionals, even like I recall 20 plus years ago, the um, career center at my university talking about unpaid internships, and this is the opportunity for you to learn, and while you're an early careerist, just soak up every, task and assignment. I feel like as early careerists, more contemporary early careerists now have pushed against that. They've gotten a bad rap for that.
Mm.
Like, and maybe they've pushed too hard. So it was very, very hard for me to like really think about, okay, are there some positives to this? Are there some, obviously we don't want to exploit anyone. We want to think about building resilience, but not to the detriment of someone's personhood. So it was very
Yeah.
tough. And the other thing I was thinking about was I also personally have a bias against sort of like um the idea of I have to earn my place to be present, right? Um,
Mm.
And I wish we would have thought about like inviting someone who was in like maybe like a membership organization, like for example, a fraternity or sorority, someone who did have to sort of like quote unquote pay dues and felt like it was very much worth it, and could speak to that. I personally just don't have an affinity towards that.
Yeah.
So that's my personal bias. So I also wanted to name that. So yeah. But of course, every professional experience, I couldn't think of a time where I did not feel like I had to quote unquote pay dues. I think I could think of times where, um, even my first job at AMC movie theater, I remember supervisors saying like, "Oh, do you want to clock out and work overtime?" It was like, "Well,
Mm.
how is that working overtime?" And it was like, "You get to hang out with your friends." It was like, "Okay, sure, I guess." Like, we're
No, I
watching
didn't.
movies, yeah. It was like, okay. It was all very exploitative. I had all the free internships. I mean, shout out to the government for trying to rectify that in some ways, but um, yeah, I can't think of a time where I did not have to pay dues.
Yeah. Yeah, this actually reminded me of I started working as a teenager, so right, I think around the age of like 16 or so. And growing up in California and LA specifically, one of my jobs was working at Disneyland.
Hmm.
And I technically worked for Kodak, but at Disneyland. And so I had to take pictures of guests who, like, were in the park.
Yes.
But if for anyone that's ever worked at Disney, I don't know if this is still true, but essentially everything is considered about like you being on stage. And so your uniform is considered to be like a costume. And mind you, this is Southern California in the summertime. The
Mm.
costume to take pictures outside of the park was wool, long sleeve. You had to wear like knee socks under your maxi skirt. And
Not a
one of
maxi skirt.
yeah, one of the concessions was that when it reached 90 degrees outside, you can unbutton your top button of your collared shirt.
Ugh.
Talk about pain. It was not fun.
Right.
And like that was like the way that this particular job worked is like the bottom rung of taking pictures was like when people were entering the park or when people were like in front of the castle because everybody's, when you're entering the park, you're excited. You're not really stopping to take pictures more than most likely.
Yeah.
And so that was like the bottom rung. And then as you ascended, the like mecca was being able to take pictures with the characters, which obviously people stand in line for.
Yeah.
And so I never made it that far.
You were hot, girl.
Girl, it's definitely hot. But yeah, that was an early example of like paying dues as a teenager, and I like didn't know any better, right? It was like, oh, okay, I guess this is what we do. And I was thinking about this also for myself over my career, and one of the things that I think I've done around this idea of paying dues is like always expected to say yes to things,
Mhm.
even if it you don't have the capacity for it or you don't want to do it. And I think for me, saying yes more than I said no at one particular time meant that for one of my roles, I was on 14 different client teams. And because of that amount of work, I was traveling excessively. At like one point, I had to travel to 5 different cities in 4 weeks
Oof.
for clients. And as a result, girl, I got shingles as a young 20 something.
Oh, girl.
So it really took, yeah, it took a toll, like physically on me. But again, that was like this idea of like, well, I guess I just have to say yes to all the things because this is what I need to do to get ahead.
Do you feel like you were ever explicitly told, like, you need to pay your dues? Or as someone who I would consider to be like a high achiever, you sort of read the room and said, I got to do what I got to do to get where I want to be?
I feel like it was a little bit of both of like I definitely have a desire to be successful. And so because of that internal desire, the external expectations of this is what it takes to be successful, I was like willing to do.
Yeah.
Um and so I think they worked to kind of reinforce one another.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, it's been a combination of there have been some explicit messages. Like, I do remember, especially working in higher ed early on, we had so many like evening and weekend events, and it was explicitly said, like, you're new here and like you're on deck. Like, you are the person who is going to be doing the evening and weekend activities, especially as someone who was unpartnered and not a caretaker for others. Um, yeah. And it was felt so unfair because it was like, well, I could never meet someone because I'm always here. So this is a trap. And also, like, everybody loves rest. Having said that, I can understand on the other side now being partnered and having a lot of people that I'm, caretaking for. It is pretty impossible to work in that way. So I can understand the intention or the idea behind the intention, but it still is very exploitative, right? So
Yeah. Do you feel like it was kind of like a bait and switch situation though? Like was that explicit in the job description that like you will be working evenings and weekends, or was it like thanks so much, we're so happy you're here and you're going to be working evenings and weekends?
I mean, I think it was a little bit of both. I think I was on board to work evenings and weekends, and then it was like every weekend and lots of evenings. And it's like, oh, this is not what I thought. Or then like it didn't feel like I had agency in that, right? So what I thought I would be able to choose my evenings and weekends, and it was like, no, you're being told what evenings and weekends. Like, we're going to do it this weekend, and
Yeah.
that's going to be. So I think that was the tough part. It was like I was willing to do some of the things, but I didn't feel like I had agency in it.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. There were other things that came to mind that also feel like a bit of a like working norm, but I'm like as we were having this conversation, I'm like should it be? Was as a younger professional, especially for like written work products, if I was the person to take the first pen, I would still put my supervisor's name first as the primary author for that thing,
Hmm.
which I think it can be common practice, but at the same time, it's like you're allowing your superior to take more credit for work than like they actually put into something, especially for like written work products. And I didn't even like think twice about it at that time. I was like, this is what you did.
So I have mixed feelings about that one, because I do think sometimes, depending on what was written and the level of sort of accountability associated with that product, right? So I can imagine in a scenario if I have an associate, the associate takes first pen, writes a bulk of it. I come in with my subject matter expertise, make substantive changes, maybe not as many changes, but like key or critical area changes. And at the end of the day, I am more accountable for that product than the associate is, right? Like I have more responsibility in that. Um, I could see there being a scenario, and you can tell me if I'm dead wrong and maybe like the system has corrupted me. I could see a situation in which I would say it makes more sense for me to have my name first. I could also see if like the associate is writing more of the substantive parts, and I'm just like coming in, I have nothing to do with the thing and just like putting my name first. Like I would never do that. But I do think sometimes those conversations, people treat them like black and white, like, oh, if I did quote unquote more work on it, I feel like I should get more of the credit. But I do think it's a little more nuanced depending on accountability, and subject matter expertise.
Mm. I agree. I definitely agree that it's nuanced. I also think that the expectation is implicit, that more often than not, it is expected that a supervisor or superior will either have their name first or be given more of the credit just because of the role that they have. And so I think for me, it does, especially in my thinking about like my younger self, it does can add in you playing small, right? Of like,
Sure.
I'm doing this in service to the client, to my boss, to my supervisor. And for me, I think that by allowing folks to take credit for their work, it also helps to build professional confidence that then allows them to see themselves in bigger spaces and like bigger opportunities. So,
Yeah. I also think that when folks, because I think this happens a lot like in law firms too, right? Like junior associates are doing all this legwork, blah, blah, and then like partners are quote unquote taking credit. I do think that there is something to, you want to be able to do the work as an early careerist and learn and be able to make mistakes and sort of quote unquote be protected, because in that scenario that you mentioned, like your name is first, like you are then accountable and you don't have the level of experience, expert, and maybe you do, I don't know, but I would assume that someone who is more senior might have more perspective, experience, expertise, and more social capital to lean on should something go wrong, right? So if you submit it to the client, and the client is like, hate this, and it's you're on the line, you're going to be looking to your supervisor like, what's up? Like, we're in this together, and you wouldn't want to own. I don't think it's fair for someone more junior to own more of the accountability as you are learning.
yeah, I would agree with that. I do think that there's a balance and I feel like it's important to be explicit about if that is the practice, then like why is that the practice and is there
Yeah.
room to change it?
Yeah. And to be clear about the expectations. I think that, when I think about the toxic nature of like quote unquote paying dues, I think the intention is typically to like build sort of like resilience in the process. But what doesn't happen is like there's no explicit conversation around what the growth or the challenge is with like clear scope and timeline. So in that scenario, it should have been a conversation about like, hey, here's what's about to happen. You're going to write, the first draft of this. The point of this is for you to learn and grow and have this stretch assignment for the first two. You'll be doing that, typically, first pen would go to, even though you have first pen, my name would go first after you've done two. After that, your name could go first. What comes with that, like sort of clearly defining that. I think outside of that, it just feels like messy and unfair. And I don't know that people are intentionally trying to be unfair. I think what they are intending to do is sort of build some sturdiness. And I would hate for us to miss that, that there is something to building some resilience and to experiencing challenge in sort of safe and contained environments.
Yes, I think that is for folks that have the best intentions as managers and supervisors. But some folks just don't want to do work. So there's that.
Yeah. Or, some folks, I think also you have to know the why behind it too. And I think a lot of people have like oversold this like, oh, if you work hard now, it'll pay off dividends later on. And I don't think that's it. I think the one that's like, that don't make no sense. And I don't think you're going to motivate, young people nowadays to say like, oh, if you, stay underemployed for your first 10 years, like then your big payout is coming. It's like, no, that's not the case. But I think what we should be saying is like, there is something to being a subject matter expert that requires you to experience challenge and to not take shortcuts. You should be compensated fairly. It should be made explicit. You should be learning. Someone should be coaching you in that process. It's not just like a series of failures and like we hope that you learn on your own. But the point of it is to sturdy up your subject matter expertise so people can become better professionals. Now, I think it's a separate matter on how people are compensated. So
yeah,
I don't know that anyone is compensated appropriately.
Yeah. The other thing that I was thinking about too is with this idea of paying dues, I also feel like we as a professional lose our agency, and it kind of is an abyss, right? Because who decides when you've paid enough dues, and to your point, like your big payout is coming on this date at this time? Like, it usually doesn't work that way. And so that's why I also feel like this mindset of paying dues is outdated for our current work culture.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't give us the agency to decide for ourselves, like, and the willingness to say, this is what I want to do in order to be successful. It's like, this is your expectation of me, and I should do this thing until you tell me to stop. And it's like, I don't think so.
That doesn't make sense. And honestly, I think a lot of people, this is the reason why, I think a lot of people will ask other people to pay dues because they were asked to pay dues. So I do think it also becomes like a matter of like fairness or perceived fairness of some people who are more senior. Like it is not fair for insert whomever to come in and not have to do the things that I had to do. It doesn't feel fair. So I can empathize with that. I don't agree with that at all. Like you should not want people to have to endure the hardships that you had to endure. You should want to make it a better situation for them. But I can understand why people do that for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, let's move into the do that and don't do that segment because I'm interested to see what we both have come up with here. And do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
I can go first. And I have a fun one. I have two that are associated with the topic and one that's just a fun one. So I'll go last with my fun one.
Okay.
So my first do that or don't do that is treat people who meet expectations. So they are completing their job assignment, but also fully use 100% of their time off. Treat those people as sort of lower performers.
Don't do that.
Okay.
No. No, I mean, I think that for me, that says that you are meeting the mark. Like, if you are filling the responsibilities of your role and you're taking advantage of the benefits that come with your role,
Yeah.
then kudos to you.
Yeah.
You fatigue balance that many of us have not learned. So I think you may be a high performer in a lot of ways.
Exactly. I actually had a conversation with a friend of mine because she was saying that she's able to complete her work assignments in well under 40 hours a week. So she's like, why would I be penalized for, not having to take as long to do my work and do it well as someone else? She's like, or I could just lie and like make up hours, but why would I need to do that? It feels like
Yeah.
if I'm able to do a good job of my job and do it in 30 hours and then take Fridays off, what's the point? But I think oftentimes people perceive that as you're not doing enough.
No, I
Wrong.
think, right.
Yeah, can't run for president. See, that won't happen at your company.
Okay, mine is similar, but do that or don't do that. Working long hours indefinitely with no expectation of time off or vacation.
Indefinitely. Don't do that. That's not even possible. Can't do that. Not sustainable at all. I do think there's also something about, and maybe this is just me personally, my brain cannot work that well when I'm working like that. So there have
Mhm.
been times in my career when I have made a choice to sort of like work longer hours to get a product out at a certain level that I felt most comfortable with. And um, there's something there with that too, right? Like, is it good enough or am I like trying to overachieve here? So, but the indefinite part is I have no issue with like working long hours if you have agency, but the indefinite part is crazy. And if you are finding that you have to work long hours to just get your job done, something feels off to me. Like either you have too much work or you need help in some way. Like you're over scoped or, something is off.
Yeah, I definitely agree that the indefinitely is problematic. Um, I think maybe if there's an end goal of like, we have this project, we know that we have to, put in a lot of labor up front, but after this X amount of time, it'll be smooth sailing and like being then making the choice of like, do I want to do this thing or not? But just the general expectation that you will arrive early and leave late just
Mhm.
because that's a part of the job, I don't think is very sustainable over time.
Yeah. And also
Yeah.
like boo, who wants to be working late? It's too much.
Girl.
Not in this environment, not in this climate. Okay. My do that or don't do that is consider tenure when thinking about team promotions.
Well, this is a good one. This actually just came up for me recently. Um, I think it can be one factor in the decision making process, but I don't believe it should be the defining factor. because to me, just because you've been somewhere for a long time or a period of time doesn't necessarily demonstrate that you've done that thing well, that you've added value. And so if we're just, you know, marking time, then that feels insufficient. It's like, okay, and what else is there going on?
Yeah. So I agree. I think tenure is one point of consideration, but not the sole point of consideration. Um, but I do think from a managerial perspective, um, it is tough to retain people if after certain periods of time, people don't feel like there is space or opportunity for promotion. And sometimes there is someone who is good and then someone who is great who comes in. So, it is tough.
Yeah, it definitely. Okay, mine is do that or don't do that. Being essentially, I don't know if we should still use this term, but I'm going to say it and people can let me know. But like the idea of being the flunky, of getting the coffee, taking the notes,
Mm,
being seen and not heard, is that a do that or don't do that nowadays?
I actually don't know if you're supposed to use that word. It feels like a no, but I'm not sure. Um, I have mixed feelings on this. Here are my thoughts. I think sometimes some organizations have moved away from this idea of like a old school true like EA or secretary, and everyone on the team has the role of sort of subject matter expert, and no one really has solid administrative job duties as a part of their role. I think in that scenario there are some administrative things that need to happen, right? So it either needs to explicitly be assigned, people need to rotate that, or we have to have a conversation about it. I do think that depending on what you are able to contribute to the team based on your knowledge, your experience, etc., it does make sense for some people to be doing more administrative things and some people to not. I do think that is the case. I don't know that, the intern should be solely getting coffee. I think that is a waste of everyone's time. But I also don't know that, we have to have the, president of the company, going around and cleaning up the trash and taking notes as well. So I think there's a balance.
Yeah. I feel like the defining factor for me is the way that folks can belittle those tasks.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The task of like getting the coffee or taking the notes or taking out the trash, and like the moment that you feel like those tasks are beneath you, I think is where the problem comes in.
Yes,
And
agreed.
like I grew up in a family where we weren't and are not respecter of persons in that way, in terms of you treat the president the same way that you treat, the cleaning staff, the same way that you treat the administrative staff, that there is a level of humanity and dignity that everyone deserves, no, regardless of like what role they have.
Yes, I agree. And I think it would behoove all of us if we saw that as a highly skilled role, as someone who spent many years as an office manager, executive assistant, honestly, I loved those roles and I thought I did a fantastic job in those roles. I would love to, in another universe, be like a highly paid executive assistant. I know I would kill it. Um, I could totally see, like, I always respect that, but I can also see when someone's like really good at their job and when someone's not. And I think the issue is people find those things to be quote unquote not important. So then, whoever can get in that job, it's like, that's fine. You don't have to be highly skilled, but it's like, no, actually, if you know about that role, you in fact do need to be highly skilled. You can always tell when someone is like really good, well trained, knows how to do it. So, agreed. I think there's, when you think about a team, everyone has different roles and but should be adding the same value, right? So, I agree. It's not like you shouldn't treat it as that, like unimportant. Okay, so my fun do that or don't do that question is, how long do you say Happy New Year? Do you say it just for the first week of January to the end of the month? Are you in February, Q1?
No, uh, I'm just the first week of January.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
Aw, end of the month.
Really? That's a long time to be saying Happy New Year.
Out of the hole, man. January 5th? No way. I mean, that's still December for me. I'm like not even there. So yeah, I'm the end of the month. So
I
sending
think
my
for me, if it
cards like, so good to see you. Happy holidays. So yeah.
if it's like my first time seeing you,
Yeah.
then I'm like, oh, Happy New Year. But I stop early.
Oh man.
It's like the
Expect
year has come. But to each their own. If you want to say it until March, child, go ahead and do that.
I'm gonna wrap it up at the end of January for sure.
At this point, we going into spring, so we can.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. Well, this has been fun. Let's get into our final takeaways and thoughts. So you want to go first?
Sure. I think the final thoughts or things that I'm taking away. One, I felt very conservative in this conversation. I was like, I'm giving old school girly. But I think ultimately for me, it is, I hope people are thinking about how we can develop humility and perspective and resilience without exploitation, right? That folks can and should be intentional about learnings and growth opportunities without being unethical, and that endurance doesn't mean excellence.
Mm-hmm. Come on. Oh, that's the word. Endurance does not mean excellence. Long suffering does not mean excellence. Okay. My final thought is making the distinction between challenge and suffering and recognizing that those are different. To me, to be successful, you will definitely encounter a challenge, which means that, you may have to learn a new skill or you may have to grow your capacity in a certain way in order to, get to the next thing. But suffering to me is something that diminishes your personhood and erodes your well being. And if that is the requirement, then absolutely not. It should be, a hard no. So, yes, I would encourage, people and us to take on challenge in terms of, development, but suffering is not a part or on the agenda.
Yeah. And recognizing that looks different for everyone, right? So, what might feel like a challenge for me could feel like suffering for you. And that is fine and appropriate. Like, everyone has to make those choices for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for today's discussion, Ani. It's always good to share our thoughts, especially on topics that we are diving into for the first time. Listeners, we want to remind you that if you haven't already, to please subscribe and follow the podcast. Leave us a review, especially it's New Year. If you haven't done so, add it to your New Year resolution, and share this podcast with a colleague that you may find this interesting. And if you want to reach Annie and I directly, feel free to email us at the don't do that pod at gmail.com. And until next time, remember, don't
Do
do
that.
that.
And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.